What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for my Week 6 Top 25. Yes, we are heading into Week 6. After this weekend, most teams will have already played half of their games. That is how fast this season is going by. And as we've done these Top 25 rankings, the first 4 weeks or so, it was really about performance. Which teams have looked the best? Now we start to shift more and more towards the resume, which at the end of the season, I think that's all that matters. I think it is about your resume. It's not totally shifted to resume because we do have to look at the performance some, but it is overall about your resume. And you have to kind of do that when you have teams that, and this is more true, I think, in college football than any other sport. You have teams that are different from week to week. They show up and play and they're really, really good one week, and then they go out the next week and they look terrible. Georgia's a perfect example. Georgia against Oregon looked like the best team in the country. It wasn't even close. Oregon's a good football team. And then against Missouri this past Saturday, they looked terrible. They didn't even look like a top 25 team. And that's a perfect example of why you have to look at the whole picture and start to kind of look at that resume. So let's get into it now. Starting at the bottom, I've got Maryland at number 25. Boy, that last spot was tough for me. I had several teams that I considered. I'll talk about the other teams that I did consider. But Maryland, I think Washington State, it was really down to those two for that final spot. But look, Maryland, their only loss came to Michigan. They played them pretty tough on the road. Michigan's a top 10 team. I think Maryland deserves to be ranked. They didn't beat Michigan State as easily as Washington did, or they won that game by a couple of touchdowns, but still I think it's enough to put them at number 25. Maryland sitting there because really, I mean, it's more about the Michigan game and the way that they played them really tough than it is about beating Michigan State. So Maryland right there, number 25. Again, only loss came to a top 10 team. Mississippi State at number 24. And this is where I think you have to look at resume a little bit. These three teams, a perfect example. Florida State, LSU, Mississippi State. Their resumes are pretty similar. The teams are playing, I think, at a pretty similar level, or they have been throughout the entire year when you look at the entire season. So you look at that resume and you look at the head-to-head here specifically. Florida State beat LSU. LSU beat Mississippi State. I think if Mississippi State and LSU played this weekend, Mississippi State would win that game. But it's hard to say because, again, teams show up and 1 week they're up, 1 week they're down. And so I think we have to kind of look at the head-to-head in this scenario. LSU looked bad against Auburn. They didn't look like a top 25 team. But if you look at the big picture, they lost with a blocked extra point to Florida State, who's a good team. And they have a win over a good Mississippi State team. So because of that, LSU still ranked for me. Mississippi State at 4-1, they're ranked, and Florida State again at 4-1. Played a really good Wake Forest team, and they do have the win over LSU. They have a road win against Louisville. That was a pretty solid win for them as well. So the Noles sitting there at number 22. They've also taken care of business and won easily against lesser competition. Washington at number 21, tough loss to UCLA on the road, Friday night game. That was a tough one. That was a tough one to go in there. Dorian Thompson-Robinson played great. And give Washington credit for at least coming back in this game and making it interesting at the end. I know they couldn't get that stop, but Washington, a blowout win over Michigan State and a win over Stanford, an easy win there. I think Washington still deserves to be ranked. Moving on to 16 through 20. Kansas State at number 20. The Oklahoma win doesn't look as good after we just saw Oklahoma get embarrassed by TCU. But still, this is a good quality team coming off of a win this past weekend over a pretty good Texas Tech team. Kansas at number 19, because they are 5-0 and because they have wins over Power 5 teams, 3 Power 5 teams, I believe. They beat West Virginia, Iowa State this past Saturday, and then also Duke. I think you have to rank Kansas, but those teams that they beat really, I mean, probably beat the 2 worst teams in the Big 12. Duke has actually been decent this year, so we'll give them a little credit for that one. So Kansas deserves to be ranked absolutely at 5-0, but I'm not quite sold, and I know everyone loves the Kansas story, and I do too. I'm rooting for Kansas. I hope they do great. I'd love to see Kansas win the Big 12. That'd be awesome, but just being honest about it, I don't know if this team can. I don't know if they can actually win the Big 12 or get to the Big 12 championship. TCU looks really good. Oklahoma State looks really good. Texas, I think, bounced back last week, and they're going to play really well the rest of the year. So enjoy it while you can if you're a Kansas fan. I think there is a chance as this team goes 5-7. I think they could lose the rest of their games just because the schedule is about to get that much tougher. I don't think they go 5-7 though. I think they'll win at least a couple more, and they've proven they're a good team. I'm not saying this is a bad team. I know all the Kansas folks are going to hate me for saying this, but I just don't know if they're really at the top of the Big 12. But we'll find out. We'll find out against TCU on Saturday. That is a game that will, if they win that one, then okay. Kansas is a serious player in the Big 12. But I need to see them win a game like that before I'm going to start talking about like a top 10 team or anything like that. Syracuse at number 18. Easy win for them on Saturday against I think Wagner or something. It was a cupcake game. This team has some good wins though. You look at what they've done so far this season. They beat some pretty good teams, not great teams, but Syracuse has, I think, a better resume than Kansas, and that's why they're ranked ahead of them. And I think UCLA has a better resume than Syracuse and Kansas both because they have that win over Washington, a top 25 win. That's a really good win. And I know that the South Alabama game, they barely won that game, but there is enough there, just especially because of this Washington win, to where I think we can rank UCLA at number 17. At number 16, TCU, they went out and just absolutely destroyed Oklahoma on Saturday. They also had that win over SMU. Again, we're gonna find out about Kansas when they play TCU on Saturday. That's gonna be a good one. But I've got the Horned Frogs up to number 16. They look very, very good. This offense is rolling right now, and they might be. It could be TCU, Oklahoma State. Those could be the favorites, I think, to get to the Big 12 championship game at this point. But don't count out Kansas, and then I think also Texas will be in that conversation as well. I think this is a good Texas football team that's about to bounce back. They just bounced back against West Virginia. I think they're going to play well the rest of the year. All right, 11 through 15. NC State at number 15, Wake Forest at number 14. Wake Forest has the better resume when you compare these two teams. Both teams played Clemson pretty tough. Wake Forest played them tougher, but they did play them at home. So it does come down to that Florida State win. That's enough to put Wake Forest up to number 14. NC State kind of looking for that signature win. They're 4-1. They're going to get their chance against Florida State, so we'll see how that plays out. But these two teams, I think, are quality teams. Utah at number 13, Oregon at number 12, two teams out of the Pac-12 that I think you really need to watch out for. I think both teams have a chance to run the table and get back into that playoff conversation. They have both bounced back in a big way after losing in week 1. And I think, again, these are two dangerous teams you don't want to play. Oregon and Utah. Watch out for those two teams out of the Pac-12. Everyone's talking about USC, but, again, don't sleep on Oregon or Utah. And how about I've got 5 Pac-12 teams ranked with UCLA and Washington in there as well, and, of course, USC, which you haven't seen yet. Pac-12 is pretty good this year. Kentucky at number 11. They lose to a top 10 Ole Miss team in a game where they had opportunities, a couple of turnovers late. This is a good. Just watching them play, watching the way that defense was flying around, able to run the football against a pretty good Ole Miss defense. I was impressed with this Kentucky team. I know they haven't looked as good against some bad teams, but when they played big games, when they played Florida, now Ole Miss, they've looked like a very good team. Just came up, a little bit short against the Rebels. Moving on to the top 10, USC at number 10. A couple of things. First of all, Arizona State, first half, that game was close. If you just look at the final score, you think, they won that game easy. That game was close, and they were not controlling that game in the first half. It was a close game. And you go back to the Oregon State game. Well, Utah just beat Oregon State easily. So USC they don't really have a whole lot on the resume. So I've dropped them a little bit. They'll have a big opportunity coming up in a couple of weeks against Utah. If they win that game, I think you could see USC back in the top 5. But a little shaky for them the last few weeks. Penn State at number 9. They are 5-0, and they had they have 5 turnovers against Northwestern, and Northwestern didn't get any points off of them. So hats off to the defense for Penn State as they are about to get into some tougher competition. The Auburn win looks better after seeing Auburn play LSU tough. They went on the road. Don't forget, they went on the road and beat Auburn, and they blew them out in that second half. Oklahoma State at number 8. Big win over Baylor. Cowboys looking good. That was really their first opportunity to play a quality team, and they did not disappoint. Very impressed with this Oklahoma State team. The defense, after losing some key players from last year, they seem like they're starting to put it together. And the offense, Spencer Sanders, continues to improve. They are, again, like I said earlier, maybe the favorites to win the Big 12 right now. Ole Miss at number 7. I've had them really in the top 10 for the most part. I think I dropped them after the close game against Tulsa, but this is a really good Ole Miss team. I think they proved that against Kentucky, and I do believe they should be ranked in the top 10. I've got Tennessee at number 6. Didn't play on Saturday. That does hurt the resume a little bit. They have the one big win over Florida. Not only that, another thing that hurts Tennessee is the fact that Pitt just lost to Georgia Tech, so that hurts their resume as well. But the ball is sitting there at number 6, of course. LSU coming up Saturday, and then it's the big game against Alabama. That is, if they beat LSU, that is going to be a big time game. We'll see if they can handle their business against the Tigers on Saturday. Top 5 for me. All right, so we made some changes here. Michigan down to number 5, Clemson at number 4. Why? Why did I make this change? Well, this is really about the resume. I just think Clemson's wins over Wake Forest, and then their win over Wake Forest and NC State, that's better than Michigan's wins over Maryland and Iowa. So this is strictly a resume thing. I think these teams are very even. I don't think there's a lot of separation between the two teams. Clemson's playing a lot better now. I know they had some struggles early in the year, but they didn't have the schedule that Michigan had to work on things and get better. Remember, they jumped out and had to play a conference game right away. So I don't think you can definitively say that Michigan is better than Clemson. I think you can make that argument. But Michigan, Clemson, very even. We're going to the resume here. Clemson has the better resume. They move to number 4. And I have been really impressed with Clemson and what they've been able to do the last couple of weeks as they've gotten better and better as the season has gone. And, of course, still 7 games to improve. All right, Georgia drops to number 3. We gave them a pass a couple of weeks ago in a game against Kent State where they didn't look great. A team is going to not really show up against a group of 5 team. It happens. I didn't really penalize them for that. But I'm penalizing them this week because they did not look good at all against Missouri. Did not look like a top 5 team. If we were doing like power rankings, I think Georgia wouldn't even be in the top 10. But if you look at the big picture, you look at the entire season, they do still have a very impressive win over Oregon, a blowout win over South Carolina. Because of those two things, they're still in the top 3 for me, but they do drop from 1 to 3. Ohio State, Alabama, both teams are rolling now. Alabama had the struggle game against Texas. Ohio State had the struggle game against Notre Dame. When you look at their wins, I think that win over Arkansas for Alabama is better than anything Ohio State has done. So it's back to the resume here. Alabama, they're at 5-0. Ohio State at 5-0. Pretty similar teams again, but the resume goes to Alabama because of that win over Arkansas. On the road, they won easily. The Wisconsin win for Ohio State now does not look very good. Wisconsin is awful, maybe the worst team in the Big Ten. They just fired their head coach. And so Ohio State just really doesn't have anything on the resume, and they're not going to. They have, I think, Michigan State coming up. That's not really going to help them either. So Ohio State's going to have to build their resume in the second half of the season. When they get Penn State, when they get Michigan, that's going to give them an opportunity to maybe make a better argument for number 1. But I was really impressed with Alabama and how they have seemed to fix some issues that they had earlier in the year. They're getting better and better. And if Bryce Young is healthy, they're the best team. Now, without Bryce Young, I don't know if Alabama's a top 5 team. Maybe we'll just have to kind of see how that plays out. Arkansas prepared for Bryce Young. They didn't prepare for Milroe, and it completely changed the offense for Alabama when you bring in a real running threat at quarterback, and then their run game took off. So, I still think that Arkansas is a good team, and that is a good win for Alabama. I've got them at number 1. You can make an argument, I guess, for Ohio State, but that one game for Alabama over Arkansas, that's the difference when you look at those resumes. All right, how about the teams I considered? Washington State, I talked about them earlier. BYU hasn't looked great the last couple of weeks. I just don't really look like a top 25 team to me. And then Baylor losing again. That's BYU's big win. So they've kind of fallen out for me. Cincinnati, they did struggle against Arkansas, or had the loss to Arkansas, I should say. Arkansas is now a 2-loss team. Watch out for Illinois. They're kind of coming out of nowhere in the Big Ten. Minnesota with the 1 loss. Because Michigan State is just not looking very good, that win is not as good. But I think Minnesota has a chance to get back in that top 25. James Madison and Coastal Carolina is still undefeated, but they haven't played anyone really. Arkansas, talked about them, still a good team. Look at these 2-loss teams. Florida, Arkansas, Texas, Baylor, and Purdue. Those are all 2-loss teams to keep an eye on. I think any of those teams could get it together and finish really strong. Florida, lost to two really good teams. Texas, the Texas Tech game I know was a rough one, but they've got opportunities in front of them. Baylor lost to good teams. Oklahoma State, good team. BYU's a good team. And then Purdue losing to Syracuse and Penn State. They've got two top 25 losses, and they have the win over Minnesota. So keep an eye on those 5 teams. Even though they have 2 losses, they are definitely teams that I think could get in that top 25 conversation. Those are my rankings. Would love to get your thoughts, your rankings. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football channel.